as I was saying before I got rudely interrupted there by the computer, Steven Weinberg's view of God and God's part in God's role in understanding physics. He's quoting theologian Paul Tillich. He says, Tillich once observed that among scientists, only physicists seem capable of using the word God without embarrassment. Whatever one's religion or lack of it, it is an irresistible metaphor to speak of the final laws of nature in terms of the mind of God. And of course he cites some of the books that have gone by that name. One of the things I liked about Weinberg is his insistence for defining God correctly. Okay, because he rails against these liberals and the postmodernists and the relativists who sort of equate God with anything they sort of feel like, and have a very loose definition of God, and one that becomes so vague that it's meaningless. And Weinberg at least makes the case for, if you're going to have a God, you need one that's capable of being intentional in creation and in the world. Okay, let me see if I can get to this next 247, 2/3 of the way down. Okay, let's see. Okay, he's talking about Philip Johnson's arguments against natural causes and for divine agency. Johnson argues that naturalistic evolution involves no intervention or guidance by a creator outside the world of nature. In fact, does not provide a very good explanation for the origin of species. Okay, and now Weinberg says he thinks he's going wrong here because he has no feeling for the problems that any scientific theory always has in accounting for what we observe. Even apart from outright errors, our calculations and observations are always based on assumptions that go beyond the validity of the theory we're trying to test. So basically he's making the same old argument that God hypothesis differs from keeping your observations strictly within naturalistic phenomena. And I think that the problem with Weinberg's argument there is that if you stay within natural events and natural causes only, you're never going to get a theory of everything. You're never going to get a fully satisfactory explanation, because the nature that you're using to make your equivalencies is not explained. Its own existence is not explained if you don't invoke a divine origin. Now, of course, what happens is he's not arguing so much against divine origins as he is against divine interventionists in things like the origin of life and the different phenomena that take place in say, the physical and biological world, as if God has nothing to do with it. That idea never becomes totally satisfactory as far as I'm concerned. He talks about the assumption of divine intervention on the part of creationists as if it's not necessary, but I'm saying it is. You have to have it at least in the origins dynamic of all this. Now, and Weinberg gets into philosophical reasons why he doesn't find God, God's presence in creation. He says, I have to admit that sometimes nature seems more beautiful than strictly necessary. Outside the window of my home office, there are various trees and birds. I'm paraphrasing him now, and he says the loveliest of all, the occasional red cardinal. Although I understand pretty well how brightly colored feathers evolved out of competition for mates, it's almost irresistible to imagine that all this beauty was somehow laid on for our benefit. But the god of birds and the trees would also have to be the god of birth defects and cancer. Religious people have grappled for millennium with the theodicy problem opposed by the existence of suffering in a world that is supposedly ruled by a good God. Okay, so he says that he's got this understanding that cardinals has these bright red feathers for competition for mates, but that would mean before then they weren't succeeding. See, that's one of these incoherent, incongruous, intellectually incongruous statements in evolution. This idea that the bright red color is for the competition. So before that, you had no successful competitors because they're apparently, according to this, they weren't bright red before that. See, it's a self-defeating argument, a circular argument. You can say that the same thing about people. How what's the purpose of say attractive looks? Well, if it's to get a mate, how come so many people are unattractive? See, it just doesn't make sense. It's not something that actually takes place in reality. For him to stand on that ground is like quicksand. It's not going to work as far as I'm concerned. It's not smart enough to be realistic. Then he gets into the gods of the bird and the trees would have to be the gods of bird affecting cancer. Well, one of the things, and this is how I'm going to end up sewing this whole book critique up. I'm going to get into these special revelation events that are necessary for understanding this. Is that according to the Bible, it wasn't a God making birth defects and a cancer up front. That didn't take place until humanity's being represented by Adam and Eve decided they were going to try to navigate this thing in strictly naturalistic ways, and they didn't need God's intervention and direction. And that's how you ended up with these negative events in nature and in biology. So there's a very well planned out, coherent explanation that's offered to us in the Word of God in terms of why that happens. That's the answer to theodicy. Anyways, okay. Let me see. 251 near the top of it. Not all scientists. Oh, okay. Here's what he says. If there is a God that has special plans for humans, then he has taken very great pains to hide his concern for us. To me, it would seem impolite and impious to bother such a God with our prayers. So he goes on to show that underneath his dedication to naturalistic explanations, he really does lean very heavily on his philosophical problems he has with understanding a God who has the capability and intellect to interact with his creation. I mean, and I could I'm not just saying that, well, he has no reason to even adventure in this territory. I mean, I can understand that's certainly the way it can feel sometimes, especially if you don't have the advantage of the Word of God to sort of provide for these explanations of why he seems to be so distant. So I'm going to have to continue then in another video because there's so much to talk about in this book. You can find it, use book